Chad Hasty Show, News Talk 95.1 FM, 790 AM, KFYO. Joining us on the phones today, GOP political strategist, it's Matt Mackowiak. Hey, Matt, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing great, Chad. Good morning.
Thanks for joining us today. A lot going on, obviously, with the president in the news. I want to start off as far as tax reform goes. There are a few stories out about how Republicans are now silently admitting they were defeated on Obamacare and the repeal of Obamacare. You've got tax reform, which is the big issue that they want to get solved. But I keep on seeing stories that this is now hanging on a thread. What do you make of the ongoing efforts right now on the issue of tax reform?
Yeah, there is really incredible urgency here that they get this done, given the failures leading up to this point this year, particularly on health care. And, there's a sense that if they get a tax reform and if it juices the economy, perhaps even if they're able to make it retroactive at the beginning of the year, which I know is something they've looked at, that could really go a long way to helping Republican voters feel encouraged and enthusiastic even in the midterm elections. Look, I think there are some issues right now. State sales tax deduction, state and local sales tax deduction is a really big issue in high tax states. New York, California, New Jersey, Massachusetts, states like Illinois, states like that, and there are obviously Republicans in Congress from some of those states, and so you're having a number of those members say, look, we got to have that in the bill. You have some hardline conservatives that are concerned about the short-term deficit increase. Ultimately, Chad, I still think that it's likely to happen, that they're likely to all get on the same page and find a way to pass this. But it's pretty clear they're not going to get much Democratic support, certainly not in the House. Certainly not in the Senate. You may get a couple in the Senate, not much in the House. So this is really going to have to be done with Republican votes. And keep in mind, they still have to go through a committee process and work up the bill, make amendments, and things like that. So I think they're really in that phase right now. They had to pass the budget for the year, which the House has now done. So the House can really start moving here in the next couple of weeks to try to get something done. I think the House wants to pass their version of the bill by Thanksgiving. The Senate, hopefully by the end of the year, try to get a conference, get one bill to the president, as quickly as possible, perhaps early next year. I still think that's a reasonable timetable, but there are some hurdles in the bill that they have to work through.
And they don't have a lot of days to do it either. I know time's ticking down. Does it? The president and Corker, Bob Corker, they're in this battle back and forth, and I don't really get it. I don't know if it helps anybody to have this infighting going on. But does this make it harder to get this job done as far as tax reform goes? Because it seems like every time the president attacks a Republican member of Congress, Republican members of Congress really kind of slow down the process, and they don't really want to work with the president as much.
No, that's right. And Corker is in a unique situation. I mean, he's a unique senator. He's the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, which obviously is going to have direct jurisdiction over the decertification of the Iran deal, which Congress now has to consider. They have to decide whether they're going to put sanctions back on Iran. So that's obviously a foreign policy question. On tax reform, Corker said last week that if it adds to the deficit, he's likely not going to be able to support it. And so I think that's probably what really riled up Trump mostly on this. So, look, I mean, I'm kind of of two minds about this. I understand why the president's frustrated with Congress and why he's frustrated with individual senators, that are having, everybody's got their own complaint. And ultimately, when you can only lose two Republicans in the Senate and pass something with 50 votes plus the vice president, that doesn't give you much margin to work with. And so, finding a pathway to the votes they're going to need in the Senate on tax reform is going to be just as difficult as it was on health care. And with Corker being no, that raises real concerns about other senators. If they have 4 or 5 that are a problem, they can only lose 2. So, look, ultimately, I really don't think attacking these people on Twitter is an effective strategy. It's that old line of you get more flies with honey than you do with vinegar. And Trump seems to give them a little vinegar, it doesn't work, and then he decides to give them more vinegar. And I just don't think that makes much sense. And, of course, then Corker responded on Sunday, both with a tweet that got over 100,000 retweets, talking about the White House as an adult daycare center, and then doing a pretty explosive interview with the New York Times. So keep in mind, Corker has now decided that he's not going to seek re-election in 2018, so he is really unburdened and unshackled from the kind of accountability that an elected official might normally have, knowing that they had to face the voters again at some point. And so he is feeling a degree of freedom that most elected officials at the federal level don't feel.
What do you think? Steve Bannon says that he's going to try to find a challenger for each of the senators who are up for re-election, except for Ted Cruz. He's happy with Ted Cruz. He's not going to find anyone to run against Ted Cruz. Do you think Bannon is going to be successful at what he's trying to do, or is he just trying to raise awareness that that there's an issue right now in the Senate? What's he up to, basically?
Well, the only one cheering Bannon talking about going after Republican senators in primaries are the Democrats. The map in the Senate is not one that allows the Democrats to take the Senate back. They've got 10 seats they have to defend from states that Trump won in November. They only have 2 pickup opportunities in Nevada and in Arizona, and they have to net 3 seats. And so they'd have to go 10 for 10 on defense, 2 for 2 on offense, and then find a third victory somewhere to take back the Senate in November. Keep in mind that that's going to matter significantly, not just because of potential of losing the House and having the House perhaps impeach Trump, but it also matters to a great extent based on the Supreme Court and control of the Senate floor. So, look, I have a lot of frustration with Congress too, with their lack of action. But ultimately, I think Nevada and Arizona, they're going after incumbents. Mississippi, they're going to perhaps go after incumbent. I think those 3 states have some potential for primaries. Nevada, Arizona, Mississippi. I'm not sure they can be competitive anywhere else. It sure would be nice if Bannon spent his energy focused on the 10 states Trump won, and focused on those Democratic senators: North Dakota, Montana, West Virginia, Missouri, Indiana, right? That would be much more productive. I understand he wants to try to punish Republicans who he thinks have been insufficiently supportive of Trump, but keep in mind, in Alabama, he went against Luther Strange, who voted with Trump 100% of the time.
Right.
So I don't understand what the standard is, and I don't think it's productive.
As of right now, what is your prediction for the House? Do you think the Democrats take back control? I know it's early.
Yeah, it's early, and keep in mind there are some huge question marks, right? There's obviously the question of what happens with tax reform. There's a question of what happens with DACA. There's a question of what happens with the Mueller independent investigation, and generally what the political environment is next fall. And all that said, I think they have to net 24 seats, take the House back. Look, I think that's doable. Right now, I'd bet against it. I would bet that they would be likely to pick up seats. My guess is it's more in the 5 to 15 range, 5 to 10 range even. But who knows? There are some seats they're going after, certainly in California, certainly in the Midwest. A lot of this is also going to depend on retirements. So far you've had some high-profile Republican retirements. My sense is you're going to have even more in the next 2 months or so, and that's going to affect the battlefield as well. So I think Democrats right now think they have the wind at their back in the midterms. I'm not sure they have as much wind at their back as they think they do. But sure, there's a real risk they could take the House back, and I assure you if they do that, they are going to impeach Trump in the first 2 months, and it's almost not even going to matter what they impeach him for.
I just don't know what they're running on, other than we're not Trump, and when Republicans basically tried that with we're not Obama, and that was sort of the tack that they took when they wanted to play it safe, I felt, during the Romney campaign. People don't turn out for that. Republicans still turn out in midterm elections, and yeah, I know Republicans have, kind of feel down right now because things aren't getting passed, but I just don't see where the Democrats have any momentum at all.
Yeah, I don't know what they're running on either. The party's very much divided over single payer. You had 15 of 48 or 47 Democratic senators sign on to Bernie Sanders' single payer bill. I don't think the Democrats really know what they want to do. They want to basically stop Trump and punish Trump, but they don't really have a positive agenda that they're really offering, and that is going to be a problem for them. I think you're going to see their candidates talk about climate change, talk about being pro-immigrant, perhaps talk about the middle class, about wage increases, minimum wage increases, things like that. But I don't know. They are going to need an agenda to run on. There's no question. And the midterms are always about turnout because they're lower turnout generally, and so they're going to come down to which party is more enthusiastic, who can turn out their votes. And it's a huge question mark whether Trump can turn out his base when he's not on the ballot, right?
Hmm.
Particularly if he's warring with Republicans, at least some individual Republicans right now. So I think that's a huge question: is do Republicans give Republican voters a reason to turn out and vote? And does Trump mobilize those voters for the midterms? And we're still, more than a year away.
Matt, I know you put out, of course, the Must Read Texas morning email every day. What's one of the big stories you have an eye on, and that others need to have an eye on here in the state?
Yeah, so we keep having, we keep tracking the Hurricane Harvey rebuilding effort, which I know a lot of us are paying attention to, but if you don't live in Houston, you may not continue to be paying attention to that. Texas health officials are very closely monitoring whether they're going to have mosquito-borne illnesses in the Houston area. So far, they've done enough spraying that they haven't seen, Zika or things like that pop up, but that's obviously a huge risk. But the Harvey rebuilding effort is ongoing, and you're seeing in those Gulf Coast towns like Rockport and Port Aransas, significant cuts or significant reductions in tourism, which is very much hurting their economy. So I thought that was interesting. The other thing I'll add is that Greg Abbott, our governor, is really trying to win the Latino vote in his reelection campaign in 2018. There was an interesting story in the Texas Tribune about his efforts to target Latino voters and turn them out and persuade them to vote Republican or certainly vote for him for governor. So those are two stories you can find, mustreadtexas.com, where you can sign up and get an email Monday through Friday every morning.
All right, Matt, as always, appreciate it, and we'll talk to you again next week.
Sounds good, Chad. Take care.
All right, thanks, Matt. That's Matt Mackowiak.